I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here I am. I'm Alex, 34, and I've been married to my wife, Jessica, for 7 years. Jessica's 32, beautiful, athletic. She's always been the kind of woman who's obsessed with running, always out there training for races or just jogging in the mornings before work. She's got this energy about her, and I've always admired it. We don't have kids, never really wanted them. I work a lot, sometimes 3 jobs just to keep things afloat, so I don't spend as much time at home as I should. But I thought we were solid. I thought she understood how hard I was working for us. Lately, though, something felt off. At first, it was small stuff. I'd come home late from work, and she'd be distant, like she was physically there, but mentally checked out. She'd go out on her runs and come back looking different. Not in a bad way, just, I don't know, like she was more confident, more vibrant, but not in the way I was used to seeing her. I chalked it up to her marathon training and figured it was just her getting into a groove. But then I noticed something else. Her phone. She's always been protective of her privacy with her phone, but lately, it seemed like she was hiding it more. She'd get texts and smile or laugh to herself, but when I walked into the room, she'd quickly lock it or shove it into her purse. Little things, right? But there's always that gut feeling, you know? I just brushed it off, figured I was being paranoid. I wasn't. It all came crashing down when I wasn't looking for it. I was working my usual late shift at the bar, and Jessica had told me she was going for a late-night run. She does that sometimes, especially when she's stressed. Anyway, I had some free time between my shifts, so I went home for a bit to catch up on sleep. I'm the type of person who doesn't snoop through other people's stuff, but that night was different. I had this nagging feeling, something in my gut telling me to just take a quick look at her phone. It was charging on the kitchen counter, her screen facing up. It felt like a sign. So, I grabbed it. Just for a second. I unlocked it easily. She doesn't use a password, which I never thought twice about before. But now, looking at her phone felt like opening a door to a world I wasn't meant to see. Her messages were full of weird little inside jokes and flirty texts, nothing too overt, just weirdly intimate. There were a couple of names I didn't recognize, Mike and Ryan. At first, I assumed they were just friends from her running group, but as I scrolled, I saw more. There were plans to meet up. Texts about how she missed them. How she couldn't wait to see them again. And then, plain as day, one text from Mike saying, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to do it again." That hit me like a punch to the gut. And it wasn't just one message. It went on, more casual, more open. The messages were almost routine. I went through the entire conversation. It didn't take long to piece together what was happening. Jessica wasn't just having a fling. She was having 2 of them, both men, for over 2 years. 2 men. Behind my back. And I had no idea. I sat there in disbelief, holding her phone, my hands shaking. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I wasn't angry yet, just stunned. I couldn't breathe. I didn't sleep that night. There was no way I could. I just sat there, in the dark, staring at my wife's phone, rereading the messages. It felt like a nightmare, like something that wasn't really happening, but it was. The weight of it all, 2 years, behind my back, was suffocating. When Jessica came home, she was sweaty from her run, smiling like she always did. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, not knowing that everything between us had already shattered. I couldn't look at her the same way. It felt like I was looking at a stranger. "Hey, babe, you okay?" she asked, noticing the look on my face. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over to the counter where I'd left her phone. She saw it and immediately froze. Her eyes flicked from the phone to me, and I could see the panic rise in her. I didn't say a word, I just handed it to her. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked it, reading the messages. Her face turned pale. She looked at me, then back at the phone, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know what to say. For a long moment, we just stood there in silence. "Alex," she started, her voice cracking. "Please, let me explain." But I couldn't hear her explanation. Not right then. I was too far gone. The anger started to burn in my chest, hot and blinding. The hurt felt like it was suffocating me, but it was the betrayal that twisted my insides. All I could do was ask, "How long? How long have you been doing this?" She looked away, guilt written all over her face. 2 years, she whispered, barely audible. 2 years. My stomach dropped. The fact that she didn't even try to deny it made it worse. 2 years, Jess. 2 years, and you couldn't even tell me? You couldn't even be honest with me once? My voice cracked, the hurt spilling out before I could control it. She started crying, wiping at her face. "I never meant for it to happen, Alex. It just did. I was lonely. You were always working, too busy to notice me. I didn't know how to handle it. I'm so sorry." Her words felt empty. They didn't make the pain go away. She was trying to justify it, but how could she? She betrayed me, not once, but twice. I work 3 jobs, Jess. 3. I do that for us. For our future. But you were too busy fucking around with Mike and Ryan to even care. I couldn't keep it together anymore. The tears were burning my eyes, but I wasn't going to let her see me weak. I couldn't. She sobbed harder now, stepping forward to reach for me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." The words felt so final, like there was no going back. I was lost, and I didn't know what to do with all the rage, the heartbreak. "Please, Alex. Please forgive me. I swear, I'll do anything. I love you. I don't want to lose you." I shook my head. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. "I don't know if I can do that, Jess. I don't know if I want to." And I walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I was a mess, pacing around the house, going over every moment I could remember, every time I thought things were fine, every time I thought she was at the gym or out on a run when, in reality, she was sleeping with other men. The weight of that betrayal was like a shadow I couldn't escape. It was all-consuming. At first, I was furious beyond belief. Every part of me wanted to lash out, to yell at her, to scream at the injustice of it all. How could she do this to me? To us? But as the hours stretched on, the anger started to fade, replaced by a deep, gnawing sadness. I'd been working so hard, so damn hard, for our future, and she had been sneaking around behind my back, living some kind of double life. I felt foolish. Stupid. I had been so wrapped up in my work, thinking that everything was fine, that I was doing the right thing by providing for us. But I had missed the signs. I had missed the cracks in our marriage. The thought of it made my chest tighten. I'd trusted her, and now that trust felt like it was nothing. I spent the next few days in a haze. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't tell my friends or family. I wasn't ready to have anyone's sympathy or judgment. I just needed space to breathe. I moved out of the bedroom and slept on the couch, the sound of her crying in the other room a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. But then came the guilt. Yeah, I was hurt, and I had every right to be angry. But the guilt, that creeping, insidious guilt, told me that maybe I wasn't innocent either. I had spent so much time working, leaving her alone, neglecting her emotional needs. I started questioning myself. Was I a bad husband? Could I have done something differently? Could I have been more present? I hated myself for even thinking that way. But the guilt lingered. It felt like I was drowning in it. And on top of all that, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the intimacy she'd shared with Mike and Ryan. I hated them. I hated her for letting it happen. But a part of me missed her, the woman I had married, the woman who had been my partner for 7 years. It felt like I was mourning someone who was still here, but had already disappeared. The worst part was, I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. It was like everything had been poisoned, every memory tainted by the knowledge of what she had done behind my back. I had no idea how to move forward. I couldn't even imagine a future with her anymore. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to believe her when she said she loved me, when she begged for another chance. But I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. She was a stranger to me now. And that, more than anything, hurt the most. It's been a week since everything blew up, and I'm still trying to process what happened. Jessica keeps apologizing, keeps telling me she loves me, that she made a huge mistake, that she'll do anything to fix it. But here's the thing, I don't know if I can fix it. I spent days staring at the walls, replaying every moment of our relationship in my head. Every time I held her hand, every kiss, every "I love you." I tried to convince myself that maybe we could salvage something, maybe we could rebuild. I tried to listen to her, to see if she was truly sorry or if it was just her trying to save face. But the more I heard her apologize, the more I realized something, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was broken. I've always been the kind of guy who wants to fix things. That's who I am. I've always believed that any relationship, no matter how bad things got, could be salvaged if both people were willing to put in the work. But this? This was different. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a few heartfelt words or a couple of therapy sessions. I looked at her, sitting there on the couch, her eyes red from crying, waiting for me to tell her we could try again. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. I realized that, deep down, I didn't want to try anymore. Not with her. Not after everything she'd done. I felt like I'd been living in a lie for 2 years, and the weight of it was too much. I had to make a choice. And I knew what it was. "Jess," I said, my voice shaking as I spoke, "I can't do this. I can't stay here. Not after everything. Not after what you've done." Her face crumpled in disbelief. "What do you mean?" "Alex, please, don't leave me. I can change. I will change. I swear, just give me a chance." I shook my head. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore. And honestly, I don't know if I even want to try. You've had 2 years, Jess. 2 years of lies, of sneaking around, and I've been blind to it. I can't unsee that. I can't pretend like nothing happened." She was crying now, begging me to stay, but my mind was made up. I needed to get out of this toxic space. I needed to move on. "I'm sorry, but I think we're done." It wasn't a decision I made lightly. It felt like cutting a piece of my soul out, but I had to do it. For me. For my future. I wasn't sure what the next step looked like, but I knew it had to be without her. Leaving wasn't easy. I packed my things in silence, with Jessica sitting in the living room, not knowing what to say anymore. I could feel her eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. What was there to say? I couldn't fix this, and honestly, I didn't want to. I couldn't look at her without feeling sick. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, she didn't exist anymore. I remember standing at the door, bags in hand, knowing that when I walked out, it was over. It was all over. It felt like my heart was being ripped out, but it was also a relief. As much as I loved her, as much as I wanted to fix it, I knew deep down that I wasn't the man I was before all of this. And neither was she. "Alex," she whispered, barely able to speak through the sobs. "Please don't go. Please don't leave me like this. I couldn't respond. I just walked out. I didn't turn around. The door closed behind me with a finality that made me feel both hollow and free at the same time. I drove to my best friend Ben's place, not even knowing what I was going to say. I just needed someone to talk to, someone who didn't know Jessica, someone who wasn't going to judge me. Ben was already waiting when I pulled up. "You okay, man?" he asked, noticing the look on my face before I even said a word. I just shook my head. "I don't even know anymore," I said, sitting down on the couch. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Ben poured me a drink, and I didn't even care that it was 3 in the afternoon. We talked for hours. He didn't offer any solutions, didn't tell me what to do or what not to do. He just listened. And honestly, that's all I needed. I told him everything, how I found out, how Jessica had kept this secret from me for so long, how I felt like my entire life had been a lie. I told him how much I hated feeling this way, how much I hated feeling like the victim, because I knew part of this was my fault too. I'd been absent, wrapped up in my work, thinking everything was fine. "Man, I'm sorry," Ben said, after a long silence. "But honestly, I think you're doing the right thing. You deserve better than that. You can't live with someone who's going behind your back like that." His words stung, but they also made me feel heard, validated. I wasn't crazy. What Jessica had done wasn't okay, no matter how I tried to justify it. After that, things got complicated. We talked a lot over the next few weeks, but I was still figuring everything out. I didn't feel better, not really. There was still this emptiness in my chest that didn't seem to go away. I felt guilty, confused, and most of all, heartbroken. Every time I thought about what happened, I couldn't help but feel like a fool. How did I let it get this far? Why didn't I see the signs earlier? The first week alone was the hardest. I didn't know how to be by myself. I'd been with Jessica for so long that I didn't know who I was without her. I was used to coming home to her smile, to her stories about her runs and her training, to sharing a quiet dinner after work. Now, the silence felt deafening. The house felt empty. The routine felt like it was stolen from me. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, into gym sessions, into anything that would keep my mind off her. But no matter what I did, her face was always there, lingering in my thoughts. And every time I remembered how much she hurt me, the anger would rise again, hot and sharp, but I couldn't let it consume me. I didn't want to keep living in that headspace. The hardest part was the nights. When it was quiet, and I could hear the sound of my own thoughts, I couldn't avoid it anymore. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever feel okay again. Would I ever trust someone again? Could I ever love like I did before? I didn't have the answers, and that's probably the worst part. About 2 weeks after everything fell apart, I decided I needed to get out of my apartment for a bit. The walls were closing in on me, and I couldn't stand sitting around anymore, feeling like I was suffocating in my own head. So, I went for a run. Yeah, I know, kind of ironic considering what had happened with Jessica and her obsession with running, but it felt like the only thing that could clear my mind. I'd always hated running before, but I figured it couldn't hurt to try. Maybe it would help me work through some of the anger and pain. I went to the park, the same one Jessica used to run in every morning. The same one she told me she was going to on days when I was working late, when I wouldn't see her until the next morning. I could still picture her there, lacing up her sneakers, her long legs moving effortlessly as she sprinted past me on one of her morning runs. I couldn't shake the image, and I wasn't sure why I thought going there would help. But I needed something, anything, to make me feel alive again. I had barely started jogging when I heard someone calling my name. At first, I thought it was someone from work or an old friend, but when I turned around, I saw her. It was Jessica. She was standing there, her eyes red from crying, her hands trembling as she gripped her water bottle. I couldn't tell if she had been following me or if it was just a coincidence, but either way, seeing her there threw me off. "Alex," her voice cracked. I didn't know where else to go. I've been trying to respect your space, but I just can't." She stopped when she saw the look on my face. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to talk to her. But there she was, standing in front of me, looking like she was falling apart. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "What are you doing here, Jess?" "I just needed to see you," she said quietly. "I know I've messed up. I know I hurt you. But I just wanted to apologize again. I don't know how to fix this, but I have to try." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to walk away, to tell her I didn't care anymore, to keep moving forward with my life and leave her behind. But another part of me, the part that had once loved her with everything I had, wanted to hear her out. "Jess," I said, taking a step back, my voice firm but not without sadness. "You've already said your apologies. I've heard them. I'm trying to move on from this. I can't just go back and pretend like nothing happened." "I don't expect you to," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "But I need you to know that I'm not the same person I was. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for betraying you." The words didn't comfort me. They just made me feel more empty. I wanted her to be someone she wasn't. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could somehow fix this. But I knew deep down that wasn't going to happen. I couldn't keep going in circles with her. I had to let her go. "I can't do this, Jess," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I have to let you go. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." She nodded, like she'd already known it was coming. Then she turned around without another word and walked away, disappearing into the distance. And in that moment, I realized that I was finally ready to leave it behind. But it didn't make me feel good. It didn't give me closure. It didn't make me feel stronger. I wasn't okay. But I was starting to get there. Slowly. One painful step at a time. I still didn't have all the answers. Hell, I wasn't sure what the future looked like. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't go back to who I was before this all happened. And that, in a weird way, felt like the first bit of progress I'd made. After the encounter with Jessica, I thought I'd feel a sense of closure. Maybe I would finally feel the weight of the whole situation lift off my shoulders, like I'd reached the end of a chapter in my life. But that didn't happen. Instead, I just felt more drained, physically, emotionally, mentally. Like I'd been running a marathon and the finish line was nowhere in sight. The days that followed felt like I was trudging through mud. I kept to myself. I went to work, came home, exercised to clear my mind, but there was always this emptiness hanging over me. I wanted to move forward, but it felt like every time I took a step, the past reached up and pulled me back. It didn't help that Jessica kept texting me, calling me, trying to talk. Each message, each attempt at reaching out, just made the wound bleed again. Then something unexpected happened. I was sitting in a small cafe near my apartment, trying to focus on an article for work, when I ran into Sam, my old college roommate. Sam and I hadn't talked much in the last few years, not because we weren't friends, but because life had just gotten in the way. I didn't even know he lived in the same city until I saw him walking past my table. "Alex," he said, squinting for a moment as he recognized me. "Holy shit, man. It's been ages." I stood up, feeling a little awkward, but grateful for the distraction. We hugged briefly, then sat down together. Sam was always the kind of guy who could light up a room, and I hadn't realized how much I missed that until now. He ordered coffee, and I just went along with whatever, anything to fill the silence that was creeping in. We talked for a while about the usual stuff, catching up on work, life, mutual friends. But after a while, he seemed to notice something was off. He kept giving me these looks, like he knew there was more beneath the surface, like I wasn't really being myself. I didn't know why I decided to open up, but I guess when you're feeling as lost as I was, talking to someone who doesn't know the full story can feel like a release. So I told him. I told him everything. I didn't expect it to feel like a weight being lifted, but it did. Sam just listened, he didn't judge me, didn't give me advice. He just let me talk. And when I was done, he took a long sip of his coffee, looked at me, and said something that stuck with me. "Man, you've been through hell. I can't even imagine what that's like, but I know one thing. You don't have to go through it alone." For the first time in weeks, I felt heard. Not like I was some kind of tragic story or some guy who'd been wronged, but like I was just a guy who was hurting. And Sam was there, not trying to fix me, but just offering his support. "I'm here for you, man. Whatever you need," he said, giving me a genuine smile. "You've got people who care about you. You're not in this alone." It wasn't some profound life-changing advice, but it was enough to make me feel like I wasn't drowning. I didn't have to face this alone. And in that moment, I realized I had been trying to carry the entire burden of the situation by myself. I had isolated myself, pushing people away because I didn't want to burden them with my pain. But Sam reminded me that I didn't have to do that. It was okay to lean on others. I left that cafe feeling a little bit lighter. I wasn't fixed, not by a long shot, but I felt like I had taken a small step forward. Like maybe, just maybe, I could find a way through this. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but the fact that I wasn't alone anymore, that was something. For the first time since everything went down, I started to feel like there was hope. The days after talking to Sam were strange. It wasn't like some magical transformation happened, but it felt like the fog was starting to lift, little by little. I found myself allowing more people into my life again, slowly re-establishing those connections that I'd let slip away during the aftermath of everything with Jessica. Sam became a regular presence, texting me here and there, inviting me to hang out, or just to grab a drink and talk. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't some life-altering deep conversation every time, but it was enough. And that made all the difference. One night, a few weeks after that conversation, I decided to go out for the first time since I'd left Jessica. It wasn't a grand event, just a small get-together with a few of my friends at a bar, something low-key to take my mind off the mess of my life. I was still unsure about everything, still dealing with the gut-wrenching feeling of having been betrayed, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was completely sinking. It felt normal. There were no reminders of Jessica, no silent texts or calls from her, no moments where I was reminded of the void she had left in my life. Just a few laughs, a few beers, and a sense that, maybe, I could still have fun without everything always being so damn heavy. Then, as if the universe had a cruel sense of timing, I saw her. Jessica was across the bar, talking to some guy I didn't recognize. She was laughing, her eyes bright, looking exactly like the woman I once adored. My stomach turned. I felt an instant surge of anger, but also a sharp pang of something else, something I hadn't expected. It was jealousy, plain and simple. I wasn't mad at her for being there, I was mad at myself for caring. I didn't want to care anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was still attached to someone who had broken me, but there I was, watching her like some helpless fool. I looked away. I couldn't do this. Not now. Not after everything. But she saw me. Her eyes locked on mine across the room, and for a moment, everything stopped. The noise, the chatter, the music, it all faded into the background. She started walking toward me, slowly, almost cautiously. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the old anger rising again, the memories flooding back. The last time I had seen her, I was walking out the door, telling her it was over. "Alex," she said softly when she reached me. There was something vulnerable in her voice, something different from before. The woman I had known seemed smaller, almost lost. I couldn't look her in the eyes. "What are you doing here, Jess?" My voice was cold, not because I wanted to be, but because I didn't know how to be anything else in that moment. She looked down at the floor for a moment before speaking. "I didn't want to see you like this. I didn't want to hurt you. I don't know how to fix it, Alex. I don't know how to make up for everything." I wanted to shout at her. I wanted to say everything I had been holding in for the last few weeks. But instead, I just stared at her, breathing slowly, trying to stay composed. "You can't fix it, Jess. It's done. We're done." She nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. "I know. She stopped herself, looking like she was struggling to find the right words. Then she added, almost in a whisper, "I'm sorry." I let out a breath, my chest tight with emotion, but I didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. She wasn't the woman I knew anymore. I wasn't the person I used to be either. "You should go," I said, trying to keep the sting of pain out of my voice. "You should go live your life, Jess. I'm moving on." And with that, she walked away. Not in the same way as before, like when she left me hanging with excuses or lies. This time, it was quieter, almost resigned. I didn't feel any closure in that moment, no sudden wave of relief. But as I watched her go, something shifted inside me. I didn't feel the jealousy anymore. I didn't feel the rage. I didn't feel anything at all. For the first time in months, I realized something: I was free. Free from the hurt, free from the constant questioning of who she was or why things fell apart. I was finally standing on my own 2 feet again, even if I didn't know exactly what was ahead. The road to moving on wasn't going to be simple, and I knew there'd be days where I'd question my decision, where I'd miss her and wish for the past. But tonight, I was okay. And that was enough. It's been several months since that night at the bar. Since then, I've been working hard on myself. Trying to rebuild the life I had almost lost, piece by piece. Things aren't perfect, but I'm in a better place now than I was when I first walked away from Jessica. And I can't even begin to describe how much that matters. For the first few weeks, I didn't know where to start. I was adrift, just going through the motions, trying to figure out who I was without her. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and all I could do was stand there, confused. But slowly, something clicked. I didn't need to define myself by what had happened, by the betrayal. I could be more than that. I took up a few new hobbies, things I never had time for when I was so focused on work and on trying to make the marriage work. I started reading more, writing down my thoughts, and even picking up photography as a way to express myself. I reconnected with friends, some I hadn't spoken to in years, and I started making new memories that didn't involve Jessica. It wasn't easy at first, and there were days when I felt like I was still living in the shadow of the past, but over time, it became easier. There were moments when I would catch myself thinking about her, about us, and it would hurt. I would remember the good times, the way she used to laugh, the way we used to joke about our future. And then I'd remember the betrayal, the lies, the secrets, and that pain would hit me all over again. But I learned to live with that. I learned to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. I began therapy a few months after everything happened. It wasn't because I was broken, I wasn't, but I needed a space to process everything, to understand how the person I had trusted the most could hurt me so deeply. Therapy didn't offer any magic answers, but it helped me make sense of the emotional mess inside of me. It helped me understand that I wasn't the cause of what went wrong, and that I didn't have to carry the weight of the brokenness forever. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown. I've learned to be more present in my own life, to not bury myself in work and distractions. I've learned to value myself, my time, and my emotions. I've learned that it's okay to be angry, but it's also okay to forgive, not for the other person, but for yourself. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of the past, from being stuck in the anger and hurt. I'm not angry with Jessica anymore. Not really. I've come to terms with what happened, and I've accepted that she made choices that were hers to make. But those choices don't have to define me. I don't need her to validate my worth or my future. I've learned that I'm capable of building something new, something real, on my own. As for Jessica, I don't know where she is now. I don't keep track of her, and I don't want to. I don't need to know. I've moved on, and I'm okay with that. She's part of my past, but not my future. And that's all right. If I could give any advice to someone going through a similar experience, it would be this: take your time. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to feel lost. But don't stay lost forever. Take the time you need to heal, to rediscover who you are outside of the hurt. You are worthy of love, and you are worthy of respect. And above all, you deserve peace. Don't let anyone take that from you. In the end, it's not about forgetting the past, but learning to live with it. It's about finding the strength to keep moving forward. And one day, you'll realize that you're stronger than you ever thought possible. And that's where I am now. It's not perfect, and I still have a long way to go, but I'm doing just fine.